Tom Campbell here. If you find something of significant value in our videos, please consider supporting their production through our Patreon account or through a one-time donation. The links are in the description below. Thank you and enjoy the video.
Well, good afternoon. We open our 83rd Fireside Chat with a bit of sadness that Oliver, the producer of this Fireside Chat, is no longer with us, but with joy that we will continue the Fireside Chat in his honor. Thanks to Jens Walter, we will have stepped up the format a bit, and although it would be a bit shorter and less often, it will still be a lot of fun. So speaking of fun, we have a new co-host, Adam Hashian. Welcome, Adam. He's a longtime fan of the Fireside Chat and of Oliver's work, and he has a few things to say about Oliver and about being on the Fireside Chat. Welcome, Adam.
Thank you, Donna, very much, and I'm very happy to be co-hosting, and I know some of the sessions you won't be here, so I'll be the only host. It's really a great honor for me. And without Oliver, none of this would be taking place. He was the one who completely organized the original Fireside Chat, and everyone since then. He completely built this incredible back-end software system that none of the viewers ever get to see or interact with. But it was a real inspiration to see all the hard work he put completely volunteer towards getting Tom's message out without anyone asking him to do it. So he's a big inspiration, and he'll be very missed. He will be greatly missed. But other than that, we're looking forward to starting anew. We'll have a few less per year, and they'll be a little bit shorter, so we want to make the questions count. And I know Tom's always ready to give us his answers, so we'll be looking forward to those. Now I'm going to pass it off to Ingo. Ingo, if you want to say something and ask your first question for today, please feel free.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I don't really have a question today. I'm sad. I miss Oliver.
Tom, maybe you can speak a little bit when you have a friend that's close to you that passes away, and you know the feelings of grief that you have, and getting over that and moving on.
Well, sure. Grief is a kind of a natural response to a tragic situation, but grief needs to be brief. It is not good if it stretches out for a very long time. There are sometimes people who just cannot accept that what has happened, that loved one is gone, and their grief will go on for year after year, sometimes for decades, and they're never really able to rebound and engage life again. And that's generally very unfortunate. And I suspect the loved one who died would be saddened by the fact that much grief has kind of limited the decision space of their loved one. So grief should be, I guess, as deep as it needs to be for you. Whether you need to cry, whether however you approach it, it needs to get to the point that it hits you, at the core of your being. Then you need to come to terms with the facts that the way they are. Then you need to resolve to go on and to treasure the memories and the time that you had with that individual. That becomes a treasure. And you don't let that go. You hang on to that treasure, for as long as you're here. And you just don't, though, wallow in what can become the self-pity of life is not the way I want it. I want this other person to be here, and life is not the way I want it. And that, of course, is your ego demanding things be the way you want them. So grief, yes. Brief, yes. Deep and heartfelt, yes. But then let's get back to the living again, just as Jens and Tim and probably Eric and the Germans got together and decided they could get this thing going again. There's also a time to move on and a time to, if anything, celebrate the positiveness of the relationship and the connection you had to the person that's passed. So then it becomes a positive thing, a feeling of joy and appreciation for the time spent with that person rather than sadness because you can't spend any more. So we just need to shift it from the negative to the positive, draw strength from it, and go on. So here we are. We're going on. And this Fireside Chat has been a very popular venue. It has a very wide following. And as Adam said, we did trim it down a little bit. It's not going to be the 3 hours. We were afraid that was kind of a tough slog, not only for me, but for all the listeners too. I hope that they remain popular and remain focused, and I would encourage people to come join. It's not a secret cabal that sits here and asks questions. You're allowed to feed questions in through the forum, through the MBT forum. There's a collection point there for questions. And if you'd really like to appear here, then you can approach, I suspect you can start by approaching Donna or Adam, either one, telling them that you'd like to be on the forum, and realize that if you do come here at the forum, this forum really needs to be put in a context of questions that thousands of people can benefit from. So it's not so much for real personal questions as it is for those big picture questions that lots of people need to understand and have trouble with and struggle with. Now, that doesn't mean they can't be detailed, and it doesn't mean they can't be personal. It just means they have to have a component in them that the 100,000 people that will watch it later, they can find it also interesting and important to their life as well. So that's kind of the overall focus here. I don't tend to talk too much about the science details here. I like to keep it at a higher level than that. So it's not a good place to go into that because that engages about 5% of the audience and leaves the other 95% with their eyes rolled up in their head. That's not a good discussion. That's going to go out in front of lots and lots of people. But I can spend small amounts of time on almost any subject. I don't mind the hard questions. You know, if you want to ask what you think is a hard question, or even you might think it's a rude question, that's all, doesn't matter. That's fine. You just have to be a sincere question, something that you would really like to know. Feel free to bring up whatever you wish.
I'm going to read a question from Andreas Jimenez. I have friends that see auras, energy, dark stuff around different persons. As far as I know, they never asked to see those things or learned or read how to see them in a specific way. Is the LCS sending them this information for some particular reason, or are they imagining that? Or maybe this is exactly like an OOME, out of mind experience, where there are 3 sources of information. You can never be 100% sure of where the information is coming from. I ask because I think that people don't ask for these things they see and the information they get or how to do it. They're getting it from the LCS for a specific reason. The LCS wants to do something with it or to grow from it. I think they're seeing these things plays an important part on the impression they get of people.
Okay, well, I can tell you very directly from my own experience, I did not ask to see auras. It wasn't something I was attempting to do or trying to do. I just one day saw them. You know, I just looked up at things and everything had kind of a glow to it, a light around it. And the more I looked at it, the more real, the more obvious it looked. And my first thought was, is this something special to me that I'm seeing? Because it was very unusual. All the trees, power lines, all sorts of things, people, all these lights around them. And I stopped somebody on the street and asked him, look at those trees. Do you see anything kind of funny over there? And because I didn't know whether it was something that was there or not. And basically they looked at me like I was crazy and said no. And then I realized that it was mine. It was my vision, my mind that was taking this in. And I proceeded to experiment with it. Well, what is it? What does it mean? What can you do with it? Why does it change like that? Why is it sometimes this way around living things and different around inanimate things? And what about machines? Do machines have auras, or is it just people? So I just started to explore. And I found that all I had to do was put my mind in a good meditation state, and there it was. I'd have an intention to see that data, whatever it was, and it was there. So over the next 6 months, I played with it and experimented with it and found out a lot of things about it. Found out that I could see an aura around a person in a photograph. That tells you something. That tells you it's not having anything to do with the physical body. It's not the physical body is putting out, this light. It's beyond that. I could see auras that showed the energy flows inside a calculator. I could see them inside a clock. The machinery didn't have to be alive. I could see them around power lines. And each had kind of its own meaning and what it was telling me about those things. Now, I don't know that this is the experience that everyone has with auras. Maybe somebody only see auras around people. I don't know. That's just my experience. I tend to be a very open-minded person with very few beliefs. So I see sometimes a lot of things other people don't see. I think if you believe that auras are generated by the person, by the physical body, then you probably would not see them around power lines. You probably would not see them around a calculator or a clock, because you would expect them to be nothing there if it's generated by a human body. But I have never had many beliefs like that. So I got a whole set of different things, and they are different kinds of auras, and they do mean different sorts of things. So then I went to the library, or not really a library, but I went to search the literature. That was long before the internet existed. You couldn't go Google it at that time. You had other means. And I found a book called Man, Visible and Invisible, written by a Ledbetter, C.W. Ledbetter, who was a theosophist. And he had color pictures of the auras that he saw and what they meant. And if I used his color scheme, I could get the same sorts of things, same kind of feelings and attitudes. I could, were the same sort of colors and were arranged the same way. But I also realized that I didn't have to use his schema. I could change it. Instead of having anger, a big red zigzaggy line, I could make anger a yellow bunch of X's and crosshatches. If I defined it that way, that's the way I would see it. So then that told me something else. The aura doesn't really even go with the consciousness. It partially goes with the viewer. The viewer can modify the output format. And I eventually realized I was getting data out of a database, and I could specify the output format. But the data would be the same data that anybody might get, and that you got that data with intent. So I learned all those things just by trial and error over years worth of experimenting and seeing what worked and what didn't. So why did it happen? I think it happened to me because I was ready. I was at the point that was the next step in helping me understand the nature of consciousness. I had another tool, another connection with a larger conscious system to explore. So why was it that one day I looked up and there was everything had auras associated with them? just because I needed that in order to learn, in order to grow, in order to do the things that I needed to do here. So it was, yes, given to me because it would have been profitable for me to get that. So it's all about evolution. And many years later, I would realize that that's the way the system works. You know, they say that if the student's ready, the teacher will come. Well, often the teacher doesn't really have a name and address and a face. The teacher's just the larger conscious system, and it just drops experiences on you when you're ready for them, and it's up to you to make something out of it, to grow with it, to try to understand it, or you could squander it as well. You might say, okay, now I can tell when people are angry or sad or happy or telling lies because I've got this aura that I can watch, or how bright are they, or how evolved is their spiritual side, and I'll use that then to make more precise judgments about people, to decide who I should hang out with and not. Well, that would all be kind of misusing it. That would not be the right way to go. Now you're taking this skill and turning it to solve ego problems, to make it easier for you to manipulate the world. And that's not useful. So you can misuse things as well as use them. So I'd say these people that just spontaneously see auras, it's because they're ready for that connection with the larger consciousness system. They're ready for that dimension to help open their minds to something larger and something bigger.
Tom, you often see or hear of stories where children see auras, and I've heard a lot of stories about that. This happened to Keith. As a young person or as a young teenager, they see auras, and back several decades ago, they would threaten to do shock therapy on them. I think it's important. Yeah, I think it's important that if a child does mention something like that, that to encourage that, because that's a part of their natural abilities. Also, Andres is asking, is this the same thing for feelings as well?
Well, I'm not sure what you mean by feelings, but I would say, let's say that means feelings about others, caring, being empathetic, connecting with others in a feeling sense. That, yes, it's the same sort of thing. If you're ready for that, then you can start getting that information. It's the same thing. You're getting data from a database. The way you get that is with an intent. So when your intent gets to the place where you're ready, it's ready, then these things happen. They just happen. Now, are they necessary to grow up? It's like, oh, I've never gotten auras yet. What's the matter? Am I slow? Aren't I ready? What do I need to do to get ready? No, you may not need auras. You may get ready without auras. You see, don't give yourself 5 gold stars just because you become empathic and can see auras. That's probably something that you need to help you along the path. If you don't need that to get along your path, or if you would have a tendency to not use it, but rather, use it for ego means, then you're not going to get that either. So I wouldn't take any attaboys or any discouragement, either one, whether you get it or you don't. Any of these things you can develop if you want. If you want to see auras, it's not hard to learn how to do that. It's just a matter of focusing your intent, giving it an output format in terms of colors around things, and you can accept the standard CW Ledbetter color chart, and you're in business. And you start, and it'll be very vague at first, and the more you relax and focus and experience it, it'll get stronger and stronger and clearer. And within, at least I found, within about 2 days, I pretty much had it under control. I could see it very clearly, and I could make it come and go whenever I wanted it. But that was about 2 days. Somebody else might take 2 years or 2 weeks. I don't know. But it doesn't take too long before you master it. The things that keep you from mastering it, as usual, is your own fear, which creates ego and beliefs. And the second thing is your intellect won't let it happen. Your intellect gets in and tends to start judging things and analyzing things, which then boots you right out of that intuitive space you need to be in order to make it happen. So, but everybody can learn to do this. It's not just for the select few. And yes, Donna, when children have imaginary friends, see auras and lights, and converse with dead people or whatever else the children often do, that should not be discouraged. It should at least be left alone, if not encouraged. And as long as you can encourage it in a sense that doesn't frighten children, that doesn't make them feel like now this is something else I have to go, I got another assignment and homework now. If you don't come at them from that viewpoint, if you just say, well, that's interesting, tell me some of what you see, and chat a little about it, and then let it go. And then you can maybe have another chat and just be positive about it without trying to give them a structure or a reason or whatever. Just let it be positive. That way they can grow into it without you pushing them in any direction, without them feeling like, Dad's interested in this now. He's really interested in seeing these things, so I'm going to have to work at this. That often has the opposite effect. They start to get away from it. So just be positive with them. And I think a lot of children escape the harshness of electroshock therapy just because their parents blow it off. Their parents say, that's a dream. It's your imagination. You're making those things up. Go play. So it's not really negative, but it's close to being negative. It's an idea. What the child learns is when you have those experiences, just don't tell your parents, because they're not going to be, reaffirming with it. So just go have them on your own, but don't share. These are things not to be shared. It's just for you. At least that's the way I felt about it. It's just for me. I tried sharing. It didn't work very well, but nothing negative came back. It's just, you're making it up. It's your imagination. It isn't real. But I knew it was real. It was absolutely real to me. So I just kept it to myself. And I think that's the way a lot of kids are. But some parents are more I don't know, what can I say, overreact to that. And particularly if they're very religious, they may say, oh no, work of the devil, some demon is talking through you or showing you things, and they may then make a big negative deal out of it, which then is harmful for everybody, for the parent, for the kid, everybody else. Now you've frightened them and made them afraid of really their own consciousness, which is kind of sad.
Well, I'd say we're pretty happy that you never got sent to the electroshock therapy.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. All right, Eric, it sounds like you have a question ready for Tom. Why don't you go ahead?
All right. Thank you, Adam. Tom, on the last Fireside Chat, I had a question for you about the nature of consciousness. And we were talking about sort of the idea of oneness versus individuation. And because there's some spiritual teachers who really emphasize the oneness aspect, and they say things such as, you're the one, you're God, you're all that is, whereas your work emphasizes more the individuation aspect, which is you are an IUOC. And so I wanted to ask some more questions about that.
Okay.
So a number of years ago, when I knew very little about spirituality and I didn't know much beyond the materialistic worldview, I had this experience which greatly accelerated my spiritual search. And that was the type of experience that you describe as connecting with the larger consciousness system. And I actually, the first thing that I found after that experience was other spiritual teachers who talked about it in a certain way. And then later on, I found your work, and you were actually the first person who described this experience as connecting with something else. And I found that very interesting, because if you describe it as connecting with the larger consciousness system, it kind of makes it sound like there's me, Eric, and then there's the larger consciousness system. And what happens is that I connect with the larger consciousness system and I see reality from its perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But whereas in actuality, when I had the experience, to me, it felt more like, oh, this is the real me. And this entire lifetime, I have falsely identified with this Eric thing, whereas in reality, I am this universal consciousness. So to me, it felt more like a remembrance of what I truly am, and not so much as me connecting with something that I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
So can you relate to the way I'm describing that? And could you clarify that in terms of your model?
Sure. There's nothing wrong with any of those perceptions. It is indeed true that we are all one, and we in the larger consciousness system are all part of the larger consciousness system. It's also true that we are separate from it as an IUOC, just like all the parts of my body are all a piece of my body. But here's a hand, there it is, there's a hand, and here's another hand, and hey, these hands can get together and make music, or at least keep rhythm, and that there are independent pieces. Now, when I say independent, I don't mean that they exist totally, without connection with each other. I don't mean that they're independent in that kind of a fundamental way, but they're different. There's all sorts of subsets of things that are parts of that thing, but the subsets are all a little unique and a little different. You can have one organization, and that organization can have different departments, different sections, different branches, but they're all part of that organization. And they all work to the organization's goals. They're all part of the organization's processes, but they're different. So being different, but one all at the same time, is not really a logical problem. If you understand how I mean by being different, I don't mean that there's a wall between you and it, and you're two totally separate things, totally independent of each other. That's not what I mean when I talk about us being separate. I just mean that we're different. We're a subset. We're a piece of things. Okay, so you have a computer, and your computer has an operating system. It has memory. It can run software. It can do programs. It can do word processing. It can do spreadsheets. And all those things are not the computer, but all those things together make up what we call the computer, kind of the metaphor computer, the digital computing thing. They're all part of that, even though they're very different. So after that, it's a matter of perspective, how you see it and how you interpret it. If you have a sense of being a piece of this bigger thing, being not only attached to it, but being connected to it in a fundamental way, like its purpose is your purpose. You're a fundamental part of this thing. And then you have this experience of the oneness of everything. Now, you can see that two ways depending on how you see yourself. If you see yourself as an independent piece of this thing, then what you'll then see is that you now have lost your individual identity, because when you're in that connection with the system, you're no longer Eric or Tom. That's gone. Your self-identity is lost at that point. You're just it. You're experiencing existence at the top, from the top level, not from, a department inside a division, inside something else. You're seeing it, the whole picture, the big picture from the top. So you have that whole experience, not just the experience from the peace part. You lose your self-identity, and you not only become one with everything that is, but you feel the love and the connection with everything that is. It's a very, very positive experience. To just say that you're a part of everything is kind of a sterile way to say it. It's so much more than that. You are intimately connected. Not even connected isn't the right word. You are all those things. And it's all perfect. It's all exactly the way it needs to be. And you can see that as, that's me. I'm me. I'm everything. Everything is a part of me. Or you can say, oh, this is the bigger view. But me, Tom Campbell, I have an address, a name, a car payment. I also work in, Avatar division, of this corporation, and I have a job there. So it's just a matter of your perspective. How do you want to look at it? And I think if you tend to see, I don't know, I would hate to say that one is more self-centered than the other. It's just that one is more self-centric than the other. If you're very self-centric, then you see that this is you. You're God, you're everybody. But if you're not, and you tend to see that you're a piece of something bigger, then you see it the other way. Now, neither one of those ways is wrong. They're both right. They're just different ways of looking at the same thing, different ways of creating metaphors to describe the experience. So when I had it, I had the sense of being aware of everything, being a piece of everything, and it was all love. And it's an incredible experience. But I didn't have the sense that I'm everything. To me, that would have seemed, I don't know, what do you call it? Megalomania almost, because I see myself as a piece that's learning and growing. I'm not this whole thing. I'm a piece of it. I'm hoping to get promoted. I'm hoping to go up and maybe one day become a branch chief. I'm hoping that I will learn and grow and understand, become more competent as a piece of this thing, so I can serve the whole thing better. I feel like a servant of that thing rather than the thing itself. So it's just a matter of the way we approach life and the way we look at things. Either viewpoint is a valid viewpoint. I find that it's very difficult as a left-brain physicist, intellectual type, particularly when I was first making these experiences. I find it very difficult to think in terms of, what is it called, solipsism. I'm everything. Everything is a part of me. I am the whole. I think about that and I said, well, what does that mean? What's really that? Well, I'm the only thing that exists. And to me, that is not helpful. If you're trying to share with other people as to what this is and what it means and how can they grow themselves, I find that's not a very helpful approach. You're everything. I'm everything. We're all God. We're all everything. And I said, what do you mean? How can we all be everything? It's not logical. How can we all be everything? We can't all be everything. We can all be pieces of something, but we can't all be everything. That makes, 8 billion everythings. So it just is a more difficult way of communicating to people. I think that's something that falls closer to the belief side. If you say, trust me, believe me, you're everything. You're God and you're all of it. And I think you have to then take that on faith. That's a leap of faith if you see it that way. Whereas if you see it that you're a piece of something larger, to me, that's easier for me to process. Okay, I can understand that. There's something bigger than I am. I'm a piece of it. I'm a very integral and it's not like I'm just a fingernail. I'm core and central to this thing. I'm a part of it. I'm a piece of consciousness. The system is consciousness. So then I begin to see it as I have a place. I have a purpose. I have a point within this system. The system gives me context for everything else, for context of what's my purpose here. Because otherwise, I don't have a purpose. What do you mean a purpose? I'm everything. I don't need a purpose. Everything doesn't have a purpose. What purpose would it have? It exists because it does. Now you're in that line of thinking, you're more in the belief space than you are in intellectual space. And, I am very right-brained as well. I'm probably extremely right-brained in many ways, but I'm also a physicist and extremely left-brained. And the idea of seeing myself as a piece of something larger appealed to me, and it was something that I could tell others and something I could describe much better than I felt like I wanted to convince people to believe me, you're everything. Because most people don't believe they're everything, and they just hear that as nonsense. You need to talk to the believers to go there, whereas the more, I don't know what we call the more intellectual types, I think it's an easier discussion. It's an easier explanation to say you're a piece of something larger. You're just a piece of consciousness. Now, like I say in my book, you're a chip off the old block. You have all the things in your consciousness that consciousness has. That doesn't mean you have as much decision space as any consciousness. Consciousness comes in various sets of capability. You have a dog, and it has a certain decision space and capability within its consciousness. And then you have people and horses and bumblebees. You have all these different things. Consciousness is not the same in every one, but consciousness itself is the same. It is a consciousness system that can be more or less limited. So now this larger consciousness system is the least limited of all. It has the biggest picture. It has the view from the top. Sort of why I used a metaphor in my book about the big cheese bean head of N division. It's that same sort of thing. It's a way of looking at things that lets you say, okay, I'm down here as a peon in N division, but I can see that there is a higher level. There's a bigger picture. I don't understand it all, but there is a bigger picture that I can grow up to be able to see. And there is a biggest picture. And that biggest picture would be what you experienced when you had this connection with all that is, this connection with consciousness. That's the biggest picture. But that doesn't mean that little pictures don't exist. Things are not just one big monolithic blob. Things are made up of parts, of subsets. Subsets have structure and meaning. That's the whole entropy thing. You take the bigger and bigger view and you find more and more organization, more and more power, more and more ability to do things. Whereas you just have one big monolithic thing, well, nothing much else you can say about that. It just is what it is, period. You've said it all. And you can just believe it or not. So if you go with the structured idea, there's a whole lot more you can learn, a whole lot more you can say, a whole lot more you can justify. Why should you learn to meditate? Well, it gives you some, should I say, some familiarity and some discipline with your consciousness. It lowers your noise. It does other things. But if you're everything already, then you're already perfect. And why would you learn to meditate? Why would you learn to do anything? Why would it matter whether you give baby's candy or steal their candy? You know, what difference would it make? You're everything. You're the baby, you're the candy. So stealing candy from a baby is nothing. It's just, so nothing then particularly, it's really hard to try to make sense out of something at that level. Okay, that is the top view. No doubt, that's the top view. When you're at that level, that's what it looks like, and that's what it means. But that doesn't mean there isn't a lot of serious, interesting, and necessary things going on beneath that view as subsets. And once you have subsets in structure, not only do you have low entropy, but you have the possibility of lower entropy yet as those subsets interact with each other. Now that gives you purpose, gives you somewhere to go. It's not just it is, you're it, end of story. That to me might be true even. You are it. You might say that, it might be true, but it's just not helpful. It's not something that helps you grow or that you can connect with. It's a kind of a statement that doesn't have anywhere else to go. That's the problem with it. Not that it's wrong. It's just as a viewpoint that is a perfectly valid and reasonable viewpoint, but it doesn't go anywhere. It's too high a level to it's another way of saying it is, there is just one answer for everything, and that's God does it. Why is the sky blue? God does it. Why do we have seasons? Well, God does it. Why is your hair curly? God did it. And there is that answer for everything, right? There's only one answer. Any question, anything anybody can ask about anything has the answer. God did it. God does it. All right. Now, is that wrong? Well, fundamentally, I wouldn't say there's anything fundamentally wrong with that, but is that useful? No, it's not particularly useful. It doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't allow you to grow or to be, or you can't get anything out of it. If you say, well, that's nice, but God did it. That's why the sky's blue. But let me study it a little bit, and oh yeah, I see that short wavelength light that's blue tends to reflect from the water vapor and the molecules, and that's why we see a blue sky. Well, okay, God may have done it, but I know more now. I know something about how the sky works and why it's blue. So I develop science, and I develop technology, and I develop all these other things which give me more choices. And because they give me more choices, I can exercise my free will in a wider range of things, which helps me grow up. So if you just stick with that kind of, it might be true, but it doesn't go anywhere idea, then you're stuck with God does it. I'm everything. I'm God, and God does everything. And that's why I don't go there. I'm not saying it's wrong. It's just not productive. It doesn't help people grow up. It's too big a step for people to take from where they are to that. And the step requires belief. Well, or a lot more belief, let's say. So that's sort of it. So it's a preference, a way of seeing things. I think one's more practical than the other. But don't think that one's wrong and one's right. I don't think that's the right perspective. It's just different ways of looking at things. Very high level viewpoint, and then a viewpoint that looks at more of the substructure. Substructure is necessary because it's something that people can work with.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for clarifying that. And I do have one follow-up, which is that so on the one hand, we have this system which is one whole unified thing, but at the same time it has individuated itself, but that doesn't mean that it's not one thing anymore. It's just individuated. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a really key concept, because the idea that individuation does not mean separation.
Right.
And it seems to me that as an IUOC, an individuated unit, evolves, towards lower entropy, what happens is that it starts to see itself less and less as a separated entity, and it starts to see itself more and more as an individuation of this unified thing. And I think that is really key, because a lot of the fear and the suffering arises from this belief that we are separate from everything else. And so I was really working with this and trying to see how can I get in touch with this feeling of not being separate, of being an individual but not separate from the whole. And so the individuation part is obvious, because every individuation has its own experience base, its own free will, its own memories. It receives its own data stream. And so somehow the fact that there's individuation doesn't mean that there is separation. And so I was asking myself, why is that? How is it that we can all be individuals, yet at the same time be one being? So where is that connection? And the more I reflected on it, I realized that the thing that connects us all is actually our most intimate, innermost sense of subjectivity, sort of our sense of I, of being me. And that's when I realized that this sense of I, of this sense of subjectivity that has been so fundamental and so intimate to me my entire life, there was always this belief that that was a very personal thing. Whereas the more I reflected on it, the more I realized that it's actually the same thing that's present in everyone. And that's when I remembered, because many years ago I had this experience where I actually was able to perceive things from another person's perspective. Like I was in a relationship with a person who had psychological problems. And during the night I had a dream where I actually was them, and I saw everything the way they experienced it. And I had their fears and their sort of traumas, which was a very eye-opening experience for me. But the thing that sort of was most interesting about it to me is that I just felt like me. There was just still the same sense of I, but still the same sense of I, basically.
Right.
So I wanted to share that with you. I don't really have a question about it, but I'm just wanted to know, does that make sense to you? And am I on the right track with that?
Yeah. Well, that I is it's your awareness of yourself. Okay. I is the metaphor you use to describe yourself. We could maybe say it that way. I got two things to say here. One, remember that the larger conscious system started out as all one thing, a monolithic thing. And it realized that in order to lower its entropy, in order to make a larger decision space, it had to break itself into pieces. So you think about that basic idea that all the pieces can make something better, can make something lower entropy than just the thing in itself. And it's, our cellular biology says the same thing, right? So things that work together can do more than just the individual things can by themselves. And that's kind of a fundamental nature of entropy. Systems that are more complex and have lower entropy have more capability, have more adjustability, have more, in our biological world, are more survivable and more able to procreate. You're more in charge of what you do and how you do it. So by having a whole bunch of consciousness with different attitudes working together, what can be created is much more than what can be created with just one consciousness. So that's kind of a key idea, that there's entropy lowered, there's synergy generated between one monolithic thing and a set of things. There's more they can do. So it's just a better process, more capable process. So that's one key idea. The other is that when you start out as this IUOC and you have this piece and you need to learn from experience, and you haven't had any experience yet, it's all been maybe benign, then suddenly as you have different kinds of experiences, you start growing off in your own direction. And you begin very much I-centered, and you begin very much self-centered. It is about you. Everything is about you. It's yours. It's your life. It's what you have to do. They're your choices. And you start like any child starts, and that is self-centered. Children always start self-centered. Any 3 or 4 year old, it's about them. And when they're unhappy and things aren't the way they want it, they let you know. It's a problem for them. As you grow, that gets less and less and less. So as you become more spiritual, you grow your quality, you become less self-centered. What are you doing? You're becoming more like the system. You're becoming more like the source, consciousness. And then you grow up a little more and you're even less self-centered. And pretty soon, you grow to the point that you don't see yourself as the center of things. It's more about other people. And then you keep growing up. And pretty soon, you have a perspective that's almost like that one you saw when you connected with the larger consciousness system. You grow up to the point that is you. You do feel that way. It's not you so much the personal identity anymore. It's you, one piece of mankind that can help make a difference. And you are connected, and everything's connected to you in the sense that choices that you make affect other people. And then they make different choices because of the choice you made. And they affect other people. And everything we do kind of ripples out and affects everybody else. And you see yourself as a part of this, and as a part that wants to be the lowest entropy possible, the biggest view. So yes, we do. As we evolve, we start our consciousness as the IUOC. It's like a child, very little experience, mostly self-centered. As we evolve the quality of our consciousness, we get less and less self-centered until eventually we have a viewpoint that isn't that much different than the system's viewpoint. Because that's what the system's grown up to. The system had to grow up too. That consciousness wasn't born, a thing of love that, it didn't grow up like that. It had to learn that. It had to become it. And so do we. We learn to grow to that. So it's not so much that that's you and who you are, as I would say that's your potential. That's what your potential is. You can be that. But you have to learn, you have to grow, you have to become it. And that's really to me, the big takeaway from that experience of being part of that larger consciousness system and seeing everything and losing your identity, is it gives you a glimpse of where you're headed. That's what you're growing up to be. That's what you want to attain. But you've got a lot of entropy to get rid of first. You've got a lot of fear and a lot of ego, and you have to put those things behind. You have to care about people and about other more than self and so on. So you've got all this stuff to learn. But indeed, you do become that eventually. That's what the system became. That's what you can become. As a chip off that old block, you can end up the same as it. You're not limited as to what you can do. It's been working longer and has had the view from the top, right from the beginning. So we're more down in the weeds. We work in the mailroom. We're not even up at the division chief level. We're still down in the mailroom, or maybe we're the janitors who clean the floor at night. We're not high up in the corporation, but we see that all we have to do is work and try and grow. And one day we will be a branch chief, and then a division chief, and then a vice president, and we will move up until we get that bigger picture. And we see that, and we become that. So that would be my view of it. That's not us now. That's the system now, but it's our potential. That's what we can be if we grow. That's our, our mission, our heritage. As consciousness, we can evolve to that space where we're one with everything. So that's the way I'd rather see it. And then that gives us a job and gives us some incentive and kind of puts us in our place as far as, okay, I'm God. Now what do I do? Am I done? When you become God, are you done? I don't know. I guess so. What else could you become? Double God or God squared, or what is there after you're God? So it doesn't leave you anywhere useful. Whereas now, if you look at it the other way, that's not me. That's just what I could become. That's my potential as a chunk of consciousness. Now, how do I get there? Well, you have to work for it. You have to grow there. You have to earn it. Just like the system did. It had to figure it out and learn it too. So it's the nature of consciousness. That's why we're in this process of lowering entropy. That's the process. And you become an extremely low entropy being when you get to that point where you're one with everything. Okay? Then I wouldn't say you're God, but I'll say that you're right there with the system. You're also a piece of that same thing. You've got the God's eye view. And you've probably got all the God's eye power as well. So are you God then? Well, it's just words. Now we're just mincing words. Are you one with what you call God? If you become one with them because you've become the same thing and now you just kind of blend in, well, perhaps that's that's an end game. But basically, I don't really see that happening as much as I see there's always something to do. Instead of having the desire to escape and be that, I'd say that's too long a view. That's way, way, way out there so far that it's really not worth worrying about too much. And I'd rather look at it as there's always something to do. You're not going to run out of anything to do. There's always people who need help. There's always something you can give. So I don't see any end to that because new stuff is coming in, all the time. There's always going to be help. Now, if we get to the point that all the seats are full, we don't need any more people at all, and everybody's grown up, well, maybe then we all just become one again, start over. But the point is, it's a process by which pieces of consciousness evolve to fill out their potential of what it is they could become. And that's kind of how it is. And we all do it individually. And we help each other in the process. So that's it's just a different viewpoint. We're not saying anything particularly different, as we're just seeing it from a different perspective.
Thanks a lot, Tom. That was great.